Imagine you are standing in front of a mirror, looking at a face you have loved your entire life, your daughter's face. And you realize, with the kind of clarity that only grief can bring, that you have no idea who she is anymore. You have been so busy being her mother that you forgot to know her. And now the one person who knew you both, the person who was the bridge between you, is gone. Suddenly, permanently, without warning. And you are left on opposite sides of a silence, so wide you cannot see across it. This is where Colleen Hoover places us at the beginning of regretting you. Not in the middle of a romance. Not inside a meet cute or a first kiss. But inside a family fracturing under the weight of loss. Inside the specific, suffocating grief of people who loved the same person in completely different ways, and now must find each other without him. This is a story about a mother and a daughter. About what we inherit from the people who raise us. About the lies we tell to protect the ones we love, and the devastation those lies leave behind when the truth finally surfaces. It is tender, and it is brutal, and it will stay with you long after the last page. Who was Colleen Hoover when she wrote this book? By 2019, when Regretting You was published, Hoover had already built one of the most devoted readerships in contemporary fiction. She was not new to emotional complexity. She had written about abuse, grief, impossible choices. She had proven, again and again, that she was unafraid of the dark corners of love. But Regretting, you felt different in a specific way. It felt like a woman writing about the terrifying intimacy of motherhood, the way you can love a person completely and still be a stranger to them. Hoover has spoken about how her relationship with her own mother influenced her work, about the particular tension that exists between mothers and daughters who are too alike to get along and too bonded to let go. She grew up in a small Texas town. She built her career outside every traditional literary institution. She wrote from the inside of real life rather than from a distance. And that grounded, unglamorous honesty is exactly what Regretting You needed. This is not a book that could have been written by someone performing emotion. It had to be felt. The book arrived during a moment when readers were hungry for stories that honored the messiness of family, not the idealized version, not the Instagram version, but the real version. The version where love and resentment live in the same body, where grief unravels the stories we have been telling ourselves for years. Hoover delivered exactly that, and her readers felt it immediately. Let us enter the world of the book. We meet Morgan Grant first. 33 years old, living in a small coastal town in Texas, married to her high school sweetheart Chris, mother to a teenage daughter named Clara. On the surface, Morgan's life looks like the life she chose. But beneath the surface, there is something restless, something she has been pressing down for years. Morgan once had dreams that had nothing to do with the life she ended up living. She got pregnant young. She married young. She built her world around her family and told herself it was enough. And maybe it was, until the morning everything changed. Clara, her daughter, is 17. She is bright, fierce, in love for what feels like the first time, and absolutely certain that her mother understands nothing about her. She and Morgan orbit each other like two planets with misaligned gravity, pulled together by love, pushed apart by everything unsaid between them. And then, in the early pages of the book, something happens that reshapes everything. Chris, Morgan's husband and Clara's father, dies in a car accident. Suddenly, without the dignity of preparation, without the chance to say the things that needed saying. And the accident does not just take him. It takes the version of the story Morgan thought she was living. Because in the aftermath of Chris's death, secrets surface. And those secrets do not just change how Morgan sees her marriage. They change how she sees herself. And they change, in the most painful possible way, how she and Clara see each other. Hoover writes with quiet devastation about those first weeks of grief, about how loss does not simplify life. It complicates it. It strips away the agreements you made without knowing you made them, and leaves you standing in the rubble of your own assumptions. Now we go to the heart of it. The central question of Regretting You is not who will Morgan end up with, or whether Clara will survive her first heartbreak. The central question is this: how much truth does love require? Morgan spent her marriage protecting her family from a reality she had half suspected and chosen not to look at directly. She told herself she was being pragmatic, that some things were better left undisturbed, that the life they had built together was real even if some of its foundations were compromised. And for years, that calculation held. But grief has no patience for comfortable arrangements. When Chris dies, the things Morgan chose not to see become impossible to ignore. And the cruelest part is that she cannot confront him, cannot demand an explanation, cannot rewrite the story with him in the room. She is left alone with a truth that arrived too late to do anything with except Carrie. And then there is Miller. Miller Adams, a man who enters Morgan's life in the wreckage of her grief, who is patient and steady and asks nothing of her, who makes her remember that she is still a person and not just a widow and a mother. Their connection is slow and complicated, weighted with everything that came before. And it is real. Genuinely, inconveniently, beautifully real. Hoover writes about this with the kind of precision that feels almost unfair. She captures the specific guilt of a grieving person who feels something good, the way joy becomes its own kind of betrayal. The way moving forward feels like moving away from the person you lost. She does not let Morgan off the hook, and she does not punish her either. She just watches her, with tremendous compassion, trying to figure out who she is now. Meanwhile, Clara is falling in love for the first time, with a boy named Jonah, who happens to be Miller's younger brother. And so the two storylines, mother and daughter, grief and new beginning, are woven together in ways that are tender and tense, and sometimes almost unbearable to watch. Because what Clara does not know, for most of the book, is the truth about her father. And when she finds out, it does not just break her heart. It breaks her understanding of who her family was. It breaks her trust in Morgan. It creates a fracture between mother and daughter that may be the most emotionally honest thing Hoover has ever written. Clara's anger is not wrong, and Morgan's choices were not simply wrong either. That is the whole book. Right there, the space between two people who are both right and both broken and both desperately in need of the other. Hoover gives us this line, and it lands like a stone in still water. She writes that sometimes the people we love the most are the ones we understand the least, and still we keep choosing them. That is not weakness. That is the bravest thing humans do. Let us talk about what this book is really saying. The first great theme is the illusion of the perfect family. Morgan built her identity around being a good wife and a good mother. She organized her entire inner life around the story of her family, what it was, what it meant, what it proved about who she was. And when that story is revealed to have gaps, to have lies buried inside the parts that look the most solid, she does not just grieve Chris. She grieves the version of herself who believed it. This is something most of us know but rarely speak about. The family stories we carry are not just facts. They are the architecture of our identity. When they collapse, we do not just lose the story. We lose the self that was built on top of it. And the question Hoover is asking is, who are you when the story you told yourself turns out to be incomplete? Can you build something true from the wreckage of something beautiful but false? The second great theme is the war between mothers and daughters who are too similar to see each other clearly. Morgan and Clara are, at their cores, the same woman at different ages, both impulsive, both passionate, both certain they are right, both carrying wounds they do not know how to name, and because they are so alike, they trigger each other with devastating efficiency. Clara sees in Morgan everything she is afraid of becoming. Morgan sees in Clara everything she has lost, the girl she used to be, before life required her to become practical. Their conflict is not really about the specific arguments they have. It is about the terror of recognition, the horror of looking at someone you love and seeing yourself. Hoover is writing about every mother-daughter relationship that ever reached that particular breaking point, the one where love is not in question, but understanding is completely out of reach. Ask yourself, is there someone in your life who knows you so well that they make you angrier than anyone else? That is what Clara and Morgan are to each other. The third great theme is the cost and the gift of honesty. This book argues, quietly but insistently, that the truth, even when it is devastating, even when it arrives too late, even when it destroys something that was working, is still better than the lie. Not because the truth is comfortable, But because relationships built on carefully managed silence are fragile in ways that only become visible when something breaks them open. Morgan's marriage contained a silence she chose, and that silence protected her for years. But it also kept her from being fully known and from fully knowing. And the book suggests that the grief of that, the grief of a love that was real but also incomplete, is its own particular kind of loss. Now let us look at the characters as people. Morgan Grant is a woman who made a series of reasonable choices, each of which made perfect sense in the moment, and who arrives in her mid-30s to find that the accumulation of those reasonable choices has left her somewhere she does not entirely recognize. She is not a victim. She is not a villain. She is a woman who loved her family so much that she chose preservation over truth, and who is now learning to ask whether that was wisdom or fear. Her greatest strength and her greatest flaw are the same thing. She is a protector. She will absorb damage to spare the people she loves. She will carry a secret until it crushes her rather than let it land on someone she cares about. And Hoover honors this impulse while also being clear-eyed about its cost. Clara is the character who earns the most growth in the book. She begins as a teenager in the fullest sense, certain, reactive, brilliant, and utterly convinced that adults are either irrelevant or hypocrites. And she ends as something more. She ends as a person who has been broken open by the truth and has chosen, with full knowledge of the cost, to stay in relationship with her mother anyway. That choice, made not from naivety, but from the full weight of what she now knows, is the emotional climax of the entire novel. Miller Adams deserves mention not just as a love interest, but as a portrait of a particular kind of quiet goodness. He does not rescue Morgan. He does not fix anything. He simply stays. He remains present in the room with her grief without trying to resolve it. And in a book full of complex, painful love, his steadiness is its own form of courage. Hoover places a symbol at the center of the book that is easy to miss, but impossible to unsee once you notice it. Movies. Clara loves films. She and her father bonded over cinema, the language of it, the stories it told. And after he dies, she carries that love like a piece of him she can still hold. But movies are also, in this book, about perspective, about the fact that the same story looks completely different depending on where you are sitting. Morgan and Clara are watching the same film of their family's life, and they are seeing entirely different things. Hoover is asking us, whose version is true? And the answer, of course, is both, and neither. What has this book done in the world? Regretting You arrived in 2019 to immediate and passionate response from Hoover's existing readership. And then, like so many of her books, it found a second life on Book Talk, passed from reader to reader by people who said, "This one is about a mother and a daughter, and I called my mom after I finished it." That kind of response does not happen for books that are merely entertaining. It happens for books that reach into the reader's actual life and rearrange something. The book has been particularly resonant with readers who are themselves navigating the specific grief of losing a parent while simultaneously renegotiating their relationship with a living one. It speaks to the gap between generations, not with nostalgia or easy resolution, but with honesty about how hard it is to really see the person you have loved your entire life. Some critics noted that the book's packing occasionally serves emotion at the expense of plot momentum. That observation is fair. Hoover is not primarily interested in what happens next. She is interested in what it feels like. And for readers who are willing to live inside that feeling, the book rewards every page. What the book does brilliantly is refuse simplicity. It would have been easy to make Chris's secrets unforgivable, to let Morgan off the hook completely, to let Clara's anger be the story's moral center. Hoover does none of these things. She holds everyone accountable and forgives everyone simultaneously. The way real life actually works. Now let me be honest with you. Regretting You is not Hoover's most structurally ambitious novel. It does not have the slow burn horror of It Ends With Us or the narrative complexity of Verity. What it has is something quieter and in some ways more difficult to achieve, genuine emotional intimacy. You do not just observe these characters, you inhabit them. The dual perspective, alternating chapters between Morgan and Clara, is used with real skill. We are inside both heads, which means we always know more than either of them does. We see their misunderstandings forming in real time. We watch them wound each other with weapons they do not even know they are carrying. And we cannot warn either of them. That helplessness is the engine of the book's tension. Where it sometimes loses itself is in the romance, not because the romance is unearned, but because the mother-daughter story is so powerful that anything else can feel like a distraction from it. When Hoover is writing Morgan and Clara, the book is operating at its absolute highest register. The reader wants to live there permanently. Who should read this book? Anyone who has a complicated relationship with their mother or their daughter, and that is most of us. Anyone who has ever stood in the aftermath of a loss and discovered that the person they lost was more complicated than they knew. Anyone who has ever been angry at someone they love and struggled to hold both of those feelings at the same time without one canceling the other out. Read it if you are a parent who sometimes feels like a stranger to your own child. Read it if you are a child who sometimes suspects your parents had an entire life before you that you will never fully know. Read it if you have ever chosen a comfortable version of the truth over a harder, realer one, and wondered afterward if that was the right call. We reach the end. Colleen Hoover wrote Regretting You as a love letter to the hardest kind of love there is. Not romantic love, though that is here too, but the love that does not get to choose itself, the love between a parent and a child, which arrives before you are ready and stays whether you tend to it or not. The title is doing quiet, important work. Regretting You. It sounds like a breakup song. But by the end of the book, you understand that neither Morgan nor Clara regrets the other. They regret the time they lost in silence. They regret the words that went unsaid while there was still time. They regret the story they thought they were in before the real story revealed itself. And underneath all of that regret is the one thing that makes it bearable. The one thing that makes any of this worth sitting through. They are still there, still standing in the same room, still choosing each other with full knowledge of everything that has passed between them. That is not the ending of a romance. That is something rarer and more lasting. That is a mother and a daughter finding their way back to each other through the ruins of a comfortable lie, and deciding that what is on the other side of the truth, however painful the crossing, is worth everything it costs to get there. Some stories end with answers. This one ends with two people looking at each other clearly, perhaps for the first time, and choosing to stay anyway. That is enough. That has always been enough.